to the Maximize Business Value podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition their business on their terms. Our mission was born from the lessons we've learned from over 100 business transactions, which fuels our desire to share our experiences and wisdom so you can succeed. Now here's your host, CEO of Mastery Partners, Tom Bronson.
Hi, this is Tom Bronson, and welcome to Maximize Business Value, a podcast for business owners who are passionate about building long-term sustainable value in their businesses. In this episode, I'm so excited to welcome our guest, Gerald Parsons, who is CEO, and Rich Russo, VP of Corporate Development with Life Languages. Today, we're going to talk about communication in the workforce, and I'm very excited about the things that you're going to learn today. I've known both Rich and Gerald through Business Navigators. If you're a longtime listener to this podcast, you know I bring on folks from Business Navigators. It's a wonderful organization based here in Dallas. It's an organization dedicated to the principles of servant leadership. So these two guys are definitely servant leaders. Gerald's new book, Ties and T-Shirts, Bridging the Communication Gap in America's New Workforce, was released last Friday from when this podcast goes out. I can tell you that you should go get a copy of the book, and I'm going to tell you how to do that by the time we get to the end of it. So welcome to Maximize Business Value, guys. It's good to have you with us today.
Good morning, Tom. Glad to be here, man.
Good to see
here
you.
With your listeners, Tom.
Awesome. So, Gerald, why don't we start with you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about Life Languages.
Oh, thank you, sir. Well, listen, been married to the same woman for 42 years. I have 2 grown kids, 6 grandkids, the love of my life. And, been affiliated with Life Languages for about 30 years since it was founded, in several different roles, from a board standpoint or as somebody that's used the tool in different, business positions that I've had or companies that I've owned. And about 3 years ago, it was time for me to make a decision, kind of what the next season holds for me. And the people that founded the company, Fred and Anna Kindle, came to me and said, we'd really like you to consider taking over as CEO and helping us kind of get the company where we've always thought it could be. So yeah, about 3 years ago, I took over as the CEO and started building and rebuilding and dusting everything off and kind of seeing what worked and what didn't work.
Well, that's exciting to have someone ask you to come in and step in. Are they still involved in the business?
Yeah, to some degree. They're kind of retired, but they're the science couple and the influencer couples. One's kind of the scientist, the other one's kind of the influencer, and so their input to me is critical because I rely on them a lot of times because it was their baby, and I can ask them all the questions that maybe a little bit hard to answer about how things started and where it's going and what they intended.
Wow, that is awesome. What an interesting exit strategy for them. Of course, we talk about exit strategy a lot with our clients on this podcast, and so that is an interesting story. And I can't think of a better steward of their asset, their baby, as you call it, in the business. So glad to have you with us, Rich. Why don't you tell us your background and why you joined Gerald at Life Languages?
Hey, Tom. Well, thanks for having us on. I've known Gerald through Business Navigators for the last couple of years. Gerald knew about me that I'd been an Army officer and I'd spent many years in management consulting. And so he says, hey, I'd like you to take a look at this assessment, this methodology, and tell me what you think. And so I took the assessment and I was just so intrigued about what it told me about me. I also quickly realized that if I look back at every client interaction I had, or every team that I took over, or every consulting engagement I was pulled into, communication was often at the heart of the issue. Now, I used to install SAP for a living, and you'd assume that my background would point me to technical solutions. But the truth is, most of the time when teams were having issues, it was always the communication between the individuals. Of course, the challenge was, how do you fix that? So Gerald said to me, hey, I want you to take this profile and I'll tell you a little bit about you. And then I'll tell you a little bit about how to interact with other people. And so I was just fascinated with the opportunity to bring this product to corporate America, because I know a lot of businesses are struggling with getting teams to operate efficiently, getting individuals and teams to play nicely together. And this is something that every business needs to run and achieve its strategy. And so it was just great when Gerald said, "Hey, I'd love you to spend a little bit more time with us, and let's take this to the next evolution, and be really take a look at applying this with corporate America."
That's awesome. So, hey, thank you for your service. Really appreciate. Went to West Point, then you're not a dummy either. So, that is a special school, and I know lots of folks who went there. So that's awesome. Now, so I think about communication as I want to borrow from a story that Gerald, I think I shared with you when I took the assessment, and we met over coffee. Gosh, it's been probably over a year ago, but we met over coffee. And I think I shared this story with you. Is something that I learned. You mentioned you've been married 42 years. My bride is always right over my shoulder here, watching what we're doing. But we've been together for 33 years. We've been married for 30 years. And one of the things that I learned during pre-marriage counseling, my parents were very passionate about buying us a pre-marriage counseling package from a pair of psychologists. One of them was a pastor and the other one was a psychologist, but they both were psychologists. And one of the things that we learned there was that communication is the thermostat of every relationship. And so when things get a little hot, you need to go to the thermostat and turn it down, right? And turn the temperature down. If things get cold, you go to the thermostat and turn it up. And so that's what I really love about this communication tool. I know so much about the way I want to be communicated with, but I impose that on other people. And so I'm excited to, but the reality is that we all communicate a little differently. So I'm so excited to dive into this. Communication is really the heart of nearly every business issue we face today. So how do companies know if they have a communication issue?
Well, if they're open for business. That's the bottom line. If they're open for business, they probably have a communication problem, but maybe not even know about it. And that's part of the biggest issue, is that communication eventually just kind of shows up as poor performance in some negative metric. And I've always found, and it's very much like what you just described, Tom, is that when we assume that we're communicating well, we're generally wrong. And so people, the first step to me in miscommunication is assuming that we're communicating well. And so I don't know whether it's good or bad or whatever. The first indicator to me of a communication issue is whether or not things are moving in the right direction, whether people are engaged properly, whether there's, we have a lot of point of need solutions, but most companies are not super critical when it comes to analyzing their own communication within or without. And so, yeah, it's a problem within organizations that they don't sometimes even realize that they have a communication problem. That's the work that we do. We help them understand that.
In my own work life, as you guys know, and our listeners know, I've bought or sold 100 businesses in my career. And I can tell you that I could be speaking to a crowd of 5,000 employees or 200 employees or 5 employees, and I walk off thinking, man, I nailed that. And then I give feedback later, realizing that the message was not as clear as I thought it was because I was communicating in the way I communicate, not in the way necessarily that people want to be communicated with. Communication is clear. So in what ways does it show up kind of in terms of employee behaviors?
Yeah, well, typically I ask these questions. Do you know your engagement numbers? Do you know your conflict resolution numbers? Do you measure those kinds of things? Do you know how your customer support is being viewed within and without? Do you know what your productivity do you know your communication IQ numbers? And when we ask those kinds of questions, what we find most of the time is that they don't really measure those things within. They don't look at those metrics, and that's just as important as their bottom line or their ROI, because we have a term that we call ROII, which is return on individual investment, because unless you have an ROII, your ROI is not going to be nearly as substantial. So it shows up in a lot of different ways, and so we go in and we ask all the questions, and that they're maybe a little bit inhibited to ask themselves. And of course, just like any good consulting firm, they just point to the consultant and say it's his fault. Right?
I like that. Yes. So I love that term, return on individual investment. I'm a huge ROI guy. As the long running joke was at my last company that I sold about 2.5 years ago, if I couldn't articulate the return on investment for buying toilet paper, we would not have provided it. And the good news is I can articulate the ROI for that. It's very inefficient to be sending people down to Whataburger all day to go to the restroom. But I'm a big fan of ROI. I want everybody, I don't spend money on anything. I invest in that. And so in fact, I don't know that I'd heard that ROII from you before, because return on individual investment, that is impactful. And so that is exciting. But, this is sort of that intangible thing. It's, we a lot of times on this podcast will give nuts and bolts things that you can do, structures and things that you can do to improve that business value. But this is one of those intangibles. So how can a lack of good communication impact the bottom line?
Rich, you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think leaders feel that it could be an issue. The question is, how do you measure it, and how can you get some science behind it? And so a couple of ways that you can do that is to take a look at some of the metrics that Gerald's already spoken about, but also just look at your company from the outside in, right? When you see customer complaints, or vendors that don't give you a good price or work with you when you need their help, those are indicators. Take a trip down to your HR department, right? Listen to the exit interviews. What you'll often hear is, they don't pay me enough to put up with this. What they're really saying is, somewhere along the way, I wasn't appreciated, my contribution wasn't considered, and a lot of times that goes back to a communication issue. Could be up, could be down, but we can help you kind of figure out, where are the pain points? Is it between leaders? Is it between teams or departments? Is it within or with outside the company, with your vendors and your customers? And so you'll see this pop up again and again. And even though companies tend to think that it's easy to find good employees, once you get them in the door, if you found a good employee, you've really got to get them to unlock that discretionary energy, that passion, that drive that causes them to go above and beyond. And for folks that are feeling like they are being heard and that they can communicate with others, you're going to see improved employee engagement. And that's going to show up in sales numbers, in your company culture, and frankly, you're going to see a big decrease in turnover and in workplace conflict that tends to distract us from our main strategic mission as an organization.
Wow, you guys are loading me up with new terms today. This has got to be a West Point thing, a military thing. Discretionary energy. That is, wow, this is a mouthful, because people can choose, right, how to use their energy, and in a situation where the communication is not great, then they can choose to expend less energy, and that would have a massive impact on the bottom line of the business if people are going through the motions or just doing the minimum acceptable work. So boy, I'm going to steal that discretionary energy. I really like that term. So the company, then your company is focused on solving all these issues with a product you call Communication IQ. In fact, the company has a book by the same title, Communication IQ. Can you tell us more about Communication IQ methodology and give us kind of the big picture of how it can help both individuals and organizations?
Sure. And here's another term for you. You've probably heard this one before, but everything that we do, Tom, is pointed to building relationship equity.
Yeah.
Relationship equity is the result of our methodology, and I'll get to that in just a second. But the way it starts is that everybody speaks through three levels of intelligences, either kinetic, emotive, or cognitive. Okay, you either act, feel, or we all act, feel, and think, but we don't do it in the same order. Like me, I shoot and then aim.
You and I are a lot alike.
I shoot and then aim, so I'm not really worried about firing a warning shot anymore. so anyway, so we all speak all three of those intelligences, but we also break those down into 7 styles or preferred communication styles, and so each one of those is measured through our assessment in 33 different areas. And then what the individual gets is a profile that shows their preferred communication styles, all of them, in a descending order with intensity and range and gap and lots of other things that we go to explain. But the beautiful thing is that not only do you have this profile of how you prefer to communicate, we go a step further than, everybody gets thrown in the psychometric bucket tool bin, right? They all, it's a psychometric tool, so they all go in the same bucket. The difference is that most of those are descriptive only. Okay, I'm going to tell you about you, and you can do with it what you will. Whether you can pick all of the ones out there that are the most popular, and they will do a good job, and certainly are worthy of use, but they will do a good job of telling you kind of the description of whatever they measure. However, we go a step further. We are not only descriptive, but we're prescriptive. So we don't just tell you what you are, we tell you how you can be with others in other situations and other circumstances and other roles that you might play throughout your business journey. And so that becomes critical because not everybody acts the same way all the time, right? And so we found that communication is the common denominator for all of these predictable behavior styles. And whatever you can predict, you can fix, right? If I can predict it, I can fix it. And so we teach people the art of communication from understanding their profile and how to interact with others in their profile. So that becomes the methodology of Communication IQ. That teaches us how to be smarter with our communication styles, how we offer things, and within whatever setting it's applied. And it holds true from the C-suite down to the lowest contributor in any organization.
So when you do this, you'll actually deploy it throughout the organization so that you can have a clear picture of all the different communication styles. Is that correct?
Yeah, Rich, you may want to speak to this, but the way we start, Tom, is we start with whatever business sector they choose for us to go in, and then we have a point of need solution that we work with that group on based on a pre-survey and a lot of other things that measure engagement and these other point of need kinds of things. And then the CEO or the team or the CHRO kind of point us in a direction to apply our Communication IQ solution. So we might work with the whole group if it's a small team, but we might just work with the sales team. For example, sales enablement. We might train them how to be more supportive in their conversations with clients and things like that.
So you really could, Rich, you could deploy this company wide, but is that how you find that clients typically launch a program, or do you typically recommend that you zero in on where specific problem areas are?
Tom, we'd love it if companies would adopt this across their whole organization, but the truth is, change takes time. So most companies do start with one area. Maybe it's a pain point for the CEO, maybe it's an opportunity. We try to help companies figure that out. So let me give you an example. Maybe you're a CEO who is trying to develop your next line of leaders, and you've put together the basics of a high potential development program. That'd be a perfect place to start with. You've got a receptive audience of folks that you're trying to train to be your next generation of leaders, and this skill can really help them work well with each other and take it back to their business units, right? So you kind of begin to spread it around the organization. Jerry mentioned a sales team. Certainly, in today's environment, when companies merge, often the sales team is asked to represent a bunch of products from a different organization to new customers and do some cross-selling. Again, another opportunity to apply this inside and outside of the company. Excuse me. Another place you can apply this is...
You can have a drink of water.
Thank you. I think I'll do a double.
I think I'll join you.
Well, might as well.
Mm-hmm.
Another great place to apply this is with your first line leaders. Oftentimes as a management team, right, we put together a lot of plans, we put together policies, we want to get that message out. The truth is, it's your first line leaders who have to deal with the employees who are going to ask questions, right? So as the CEO, let's say you put out a new policy, not every line employee is going to come in and ask you their questions, but they're going to ask their first line supervisor those questions. And so that's often a great place to enable better communication, is right there where kind of the rubber meets the road between individual contributor and their supervisor. And so that's another place where we see companies realize that they need to shore up the training and the development they give their first line supervisors.
Awesome. All right. So we're up on the break. We're talking with Gerald Parsons and Rich Russo with Life Languages. Let's take a quick break. Back in 30 seconds.
Every business will eventually transition, some internally to employees and managers, and some externally to third-party buyers. Mastery Partners equips business owners to maximize business value so they can transition their businesses on their terms using our 4-step process. We start with a snapshot of where your business is today. Then we help you understand where you want to be and design a custom strategy to get you there. Next, we help you execute that strategy with the assistance of our amazing resource network. And ultimately, you'll be able to transition your business on your terms. What are you waiting for? More time? More revenue? If you want to maximize your business value, it takes time. Now is that time. Get started today by checking us out at www.masterypartners.com or email us at info@masterypartners.com to learn more.
We're back with Gerald Parsons and Rich Russo with Life Languages, and we're talking about communications in the workforce. As our listeners know, I work with a lot of clients, and frequently I hear the number one problem in their company is communications. And that is just a very common theme. I experienced that myself when I was a CEO of a number of different businesses, or I worked in other businesses. Everybody always complains that communication is the number one issue, and we're talking about ways that you can solve that. Now, I'd imagine that in today's workforce, given that there are many generations kind of working together, that too could introduce some additional communication issues. In your new book, Ties and T-Shirts, it provides some great insight into this. Now, I was particularly amused by your story of miscommunication between Millennial Mike and Baby Boomer Bobby. I really enjoyed that regarding an update on a project and how they differ in their communications style. So, Gerald, what can you share with us about the book?
Well, first of all, thank you for mentioning it, Tom. Ties and T-shirts was something I was kind of sitting around in my office and experiencing exactly what Boomer Bobby was experiencing. I had turned my phone on silent and I was staring at my screen, not expecting the millennials that worked for me to be able to contact me any other way than through an email, right? I mean, really? What other form is there, right? Or a phone call. So that became kind of centric to what I wanted to get across in the book. The Boomer generation is already 45% retired, and they're retiring at about 10,000 people a week. And so in the next couple of years, the millennial generation is going to be the folks that are running the companies, and a lot of them are already. But the challenge is for traditional business people like myself or boomers that have grown up with traditional business techniques and methodologies, that's just not the way they operate. And it's not the way they communicate. And I can tell you that very quickly, there's going to be a big vacuum in the marketplace with regard to how companies are manage their communication, because they don't know. We don't know how to reach across and build a bridge. Leadership, in my estimation, is not focusing on the gap, but focusing on the bridge, right? And so what my book tries to do is try to explain how we can take this methodology that we call life languages and apply it and build those bridges with the different generations that are coming. It's not just millennials, obviously Gen Zers, Gen Xers, and all those folks, but they all communicate differently. And if you assume that your communication is going to be received and understood a certain way, then you're probably going to be wrong. I don't know about you, but I've had this happen to me, Tom, where somebody, I'll be talking to a group or some of my employees or whatever, and they'll come back to me the next day and says, I really enjoyed it when you said this. And I said, I don't remember saying that. And it's not because I have dementia. It's just because I don't think I said that.
Wow.
And so the truth is that we have to practice communication. We practice everything else, right? We practice our skills to be, if we're lawyers, we learn how to practice law. If we're athletes, we practice our sport. Whatever you want to apply it to. If you're a businessman, you practice the principles of good business, the best practices. But most of us don't practice good communication because we don't understand it. We don't take those principles of good communication and apply it in our daily lives, which is absolutely critical if we're going to move forward and have the kind of successes that we all want.
That's awesome. I heard a couple of years ago, I speak at a lot of conferences, and I was speaking at a conference, gosh, I'd probably say 4 or 5 years ago, where the speaker was talking about kind of different styles of baby boomers versus millennials. That was all the rage then. Of course, I think I read this in your book, that right now the millennials is the largest piece of our workforce, right? Is that right? Did I see that there?
It's currently 35%, but it's growing by leaps and bounds.
Well, yeah, I am the last baby boomer. When I came through the baby boomer door in 1964, closed it and locked it right behind me, and so then the next generation was coming behind that. But one interesting thing that the keynote at that conference that I happened to be at, he was speaking about kind of different styles. He said, you know what, you baby boomers who think that these millennials don't get it and aren't working and they're not loyal, That's exactly what the great generation thought about you guys, 30 years ago. And so things, it comes back, because I promise you, the millennials out there, that they'll be, 2 generations behind you. You're going to be complaining about them a lot. And so it's kind of all goes in big circles. So there are lots of programs out. I just thought I'd share that story with you. There are lots of programs out there that help business owners communicate with a multi-generational workforce. What sets communication IQ apart from other programs and assessments and things like that?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, Tom, because one of the things that we think is key is the differentiator between the description of your profile and the application of that profile. We think that's key. Now, let me tell you a little story. I had hired a marketing director and a millennial marketing director, and I would walk by her office every afternoon, and she'd be staring out the window, and I'm like, and I'd be like, I'm paying her a lot of money to stare out the window. I've got that mindset like you. What's my ROI here, right? But yet when we go into a meeting, she was the most brilliant one in the meeting. Okay, and so I became very aware that her style of processing communication and processing the things in her life were one of the languages that we call contemplator. So she's going to think first about everything. And in that particular language, they're probably the smartest person in the room, but they're not always going to tell you what you want to know. You'll have to ask for it. And so if you don't know these subtleties about some of these communication styles, then you could do what I did, and that is just assume that you're paying somebody a lot of money to stare out the window. But what I really found out was I had a contributor that was brilliant and didn't want to say anything until she knew she was right. And so that's a valuable asset when you have somebody on your team like that. But unless you know how to manage them, unless you know how to draw that gold out of them, then you could miss the boat completely, or you could do something stupid like get rid of them and not have understood what you really had. So our tool is different in that we teach you how to find the gold. We have a deal called a communication map, and what that does is when we go in and work with clients, we take all of the information that we gather from a pre-survey to the assessments, we put it on a map, and we say, okay, this is what's going on. And is this what you want to go on? Typically it's not. And how do we move forward by using your tool? And so that's where some of these point of need things come in. But we create that communication map. Here's two of the things that are really critical when we look at that is that by category of employee, whether it's C-suite people or operational folks or salespeople, there are pluses and minuses. And if we know what those pluses and minuses are, what can we do? Obviously, we can shore up the minuses to bring out some gold, and we can add to the pluses to make things speed up and be more productive. So I think that's kind of the difference in what we do in the marketplace.
Awesome. That's a great differentiator. By the way, I think that marketing person worked for me too. So
yeah. Did you fire him?
I might have. Maybe that's when she came to work for you, and you realized how brilliant she was.
Yeah, right.
Everybody communicates differently, and I'm a big fan of thinking time. When I see somebody just sitting there, that doesn't bother me, because I actually schedule in my calendar thinking time. When do I want to be thinking? Right. And so somebody could just as easily walk by my desk and go, "What are you doing?" I'm thinking, and by the way, you just interrupted me. And so I would typically close the door. So one last business question, and I'll toss this up to either or both of you. This podcast is, of course, is about maximizing business value. So in your opinion, what is the one most important thing you would recommend business owners do to build business value?
Well, Rich, you go first and I'll close it up.
Sure. Yeah, Tom, I don't know who came up with this saying, but if you want to make a fast decision, get everybody in the room who thinks the same. If you want to make the right decision, you need diversity. You need to bring in different opinions. And so part of what attracted me to the communication IQ methodology is that it enables a leader to appreciate each of the strengths everyone has, or to recognize among a team, gosh, you know what? We're missing a perspective here. I'm a shaper, and if I'm in a room with 10 shapers, boy, things happen fast. But we have a set of blinders on because we may not be seeing the full picture. So, in terms of maximizing business value, I would say it's worth the extra time to bring a diverse group together, and it's worth the extra time to figure out how do you unlock the key character strengths that each person brings to the table.
Yeah, it's not just as easy as bringing them all into a room. I think that second part there is the key, is how do you unlock that communication? Gerald, how about you? How do business owners maximize business value?
Well, I think something that I said earlier in the broadcast, Tom, and that is that if you've invested in your employees, a business is only as good, obviously, as its employees and how they perform and how they feel connected. It's very difficult for owners today to create an intrinsic value in their employees, but that's why we call it ROII, return on individual investment. So what are we doing to maximize our values based on what we're putting into the lives of our employees and investing in them? That's why so many DE&I folks and learning officers and CHROs are out there beating the bushes for technologies and methodologies like what we have, so that they can bring it into the lives of these people. What happens to that is that their team becomes more cohesive, more congruent, more productive, and things like turnover starts to dissipate. Let me tell you a quick story before we get off, and that is we were called into a large insurance company over in Fort Worth because they were experiencing a 40% turnover, which is huge. And the CEO said, just bring everybody across my desk for 15 minutes and tell them that I want to hear their solution. So we got involved. We got invited for our 15 minutes. Our 15 minutes turned into 2.5 hours and a 3-year engagement. And here's why. Because we showed the CEO that he was doing exactly what Rich was describing. He put everybody in the room that was just like him. And so the value of the business segments down below them were like, nobody cares about what we think or what we say or what we do. It's just my way or the highway, and get out if you don't. And so people don't react well to those kinds of things. So we go in and we help business owners understand the value of great communication within their organizations.
That is awesome. I would tell you, of course, as every business owner knows, the largest investment they make is in their human capital, right? I mean, that's almost every business across the board. That is, but you have to think about it as an investment, and I love that, being able to communicate better. As a CEO of a business, when I was hiring and bringing on executives to work in our C-suite, I always looked for people who think differently. Now, I want them to share my values, but I want people who think differently, because if people agreed with me all the time, I would say, you're worthless. Why am I paying you? I don't need you if you think exactly the way I do. I want people who will challenge my thought process and make this a better company. So those are some great solutions. So everybody who who normally watches this or listens to this podcast knows that you always get a bonus question. So I'm going to toss this one out first to Gerald and then to Rich. The bonus question is, what personality trait has gotten you into the most trouble throughout the years? So first Gerald, then Rich.
Well, let's see. My wife would tell you one thing. I would tell you another thing, right?
Well, my wife would give a list. She said, I can't do one thing, right?
One? I'm limited to one. I'll tell you, I sabotage myself sometimes with my mover life language, because my mover life language wants to get down the road so far, change, innovate, do all these things. But then all I see behind me is a cloud of dust. There's nobody following because they can't find me because I've gone too far without making sure the team is with me. That's gotten me in more trouble than I care to admit.
I love that. Rich, how about you?
Well, it's funny, Tom, when you asked that question, I started thinking back to all my old performance reviews. And one of the things that communication IQ, we help folks understand, here are the strengths they have, but also the things to work on. And sure enough, what my boss would consider a strength, it was very easy for him to pick out the challenging thing. So I'm a shaper, and by nature would like to work on strategy and large picture planning. The challenge, though, is when a shaper is under distress, you see the challenge come out of, all right, these guys don't get the plan. They're not moving fast enough. I'll just take it over. And so Gerald's been really kind and taught me a little bit about how I'm wired as a shaper. And he says, when you start to see this idea that you're frustrated and you're just going to grab the plan and take over, that's a sign that things are off track. And sure enough, as I looked back through old performance reviews, I took on a lot of extra projects when I was in that stressed mode. So that one still is something I can continue to work on.
You need to come to the Tom Bronson School of Just Say No.
Yeah.
So this has been fun, guys. It's been fascinating to learn all of this. How can our listeners and viewers get a chance to determine their primary communication language or speak with someone about communication IQ methodology?
Well, they can do a couple of things, Tom. They can go to our website, which is very easily www.lifelanguages.com. They can take the assessment on there. There are two options. You can take a personal assessment or a professional one. You take the professional one, it gives you a little bit bigger, a little bit more robust report regarding kind of how you are in the marketplace and in your business workplace. If you take the personal one, you get all of your languages, but you get a little bit less information about how you might act in leadership roles and different things like that. So yeah, www.lifelanguages.com.
Awesome. So Gerald, Rich, thank you for being our guest today. This has been a lot of fun. You can find both of them at lifelanguages.com or on LinkedIn. And as always, you can always reach out to us here at Mastery Partners because we are always happy to make connections. This is the Maximize Business Value podcast, where we give practical advice to business owners who are passionate about building long-term sustainable value in their businesses. Be sure to tune in each week and follow us wherever you found this podcast. Be sure to comment. We love comments and we respond to all of them. So until next time, I'm Tom Bronson, reminding you to work on those communication skills while you maximize business value.
Thank you for tuning into the Maximize Business Value podcast with Tom Bronson. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition on their terms. Learn more on how to build long-term sustainable business value and get free value-building tools by visiting our website, www.masterypartners.com. That's master with a Y, masterypartners.com. Check it out.
That was perfect. I wouldn't make any changes on that.